Hi everybody, my name is Francesca Mundrick and I am bringing to you my final senior seminar presentation on the Mayan societal reliance on the cenotes of the Yucatan Peninsula, a study of how freshwater shapes human civilizations. A little bit about the geography of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is located in the southern part of Mexico. The Yucatan state is actually located in the northeastern region of the peninsula. The majority of the population here is the native Mayan people. These people have existed here for a few thousand years, and their ruins still exist today. Again, connecting to the history, the Mayans have existed in this area and are the main native peoples. The conquistadors from Spain also discovered this area, and they actually coined the name Yucatan because of their misunderstanding of the Mayan languages. So that's a fun fact a lot of people don't know. Tourism is the main contributor economically to this region. This is kind of an obvious fact because it's a tropical climate. There's a lot of beaches and resorts. So it's an obvious fact that tourism is a huge economic supporter. The geological history of the Yucatan is actually very unique and is a large part of what drew me to this topic. So, about 65 million years ago, at the end of the late Cretaceous period, when the dinosaurs still existed, the sea level was a few hundred feet higher. Underneath these shallow ocean waters existed a large coral bed, and when the last ice age happened about 10,000 years ago, these sea level rises receded, exposing this large coral bed, which is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The coral eventually changed into limestone and created a huge limestone platform that made up the surface of the peninsula. And this is the reason for the area's lack of hydrology and natural watershed. There is no existing surface water, there's no lakes, there's no rivers, there's no streams, because all of the water found here is only seen because of karst formations. In studying geology, we all know how permeable limestone is. And how easily a limestone area can be changed into karst formations. A karst formation, if you don't know, is basically a sinkhole developed from water eroding limestone and exposing groundwater underneath the surface. So again, the karst formations formed, and then cenotes, which basically are a continuation of karst formations, are formed from karst formations getting larger and caving in on themselves, exposing greater amounts of water. So when you walk into these karst formations, it's pretty much looks like a cave, and you can look up and see the round circular top of where the limestone was mostly eroded by water, exposing the large pools of deep groundwater underneath. So scientists also believe that the Chicxulub crater, caused by the asteroid that hit Earth again around 65 million years ago, causing the massive extinction of the dinosaurs, also plays into the geology of the Yucatan. In the southern region, or the southern border of the crater, that is now filled in with sediment, so you really can't even see it, but the southern border of the crater is home to the highest density of cenotes and is referred to as the famous Ring of Cenotes. The significance of the cenotes in the Yucatan region is again kind of obvious. My research thesis was that without the existence of the cenotes, life in this region of Mexico would be severely inhibited. So again, with the nature of the Yucatan geology and the hydrology, there's no natural watershed. So without the cenotes, the freshwater sources available would have not been in existence, and the Mayan populations would have been severely stunted and might not even have been able to exist in this area. It's a life supporter to the Mayan people again for thousands of years, and also for a lot of wildlife and plant life, fostering a large amount of biodiversity and really spectacular ecosystems. So the freshwater and the tropical environments are supported greatly by this area. And again, the cenotes do help the area economically because of the draw to the tours of the caves and caverns and cenotes that really anybody would be interested in. So it really does affect also the current tourism of the area. Pollution and threats to the Yucatan cenotes. Since the cenotes are the only freshwater sources in this region, it is very important that they are not exposed to contamination. Saltwater intrusion is on the minds of a lot of scientists studying this area. Obviously, if salt water gets into the freshwater supply, it taints the freshwater supply so that it is undrinkable. So when a lot of fresh water is removed from the groundwater here, it's always a worry, since it's a coastal region, that salt water will intrude upon the cenotes. Even though there's over 2,200 counted cenotes, it's still always a factor of conserving these areas and keeping them pure and keeping them clean. Tourism and population demands have been also a huge pressure on keeping these areas as unconserved and preserved as possible. With tourism commands comes, of course, number one, human touch. As you can see in the picture behind you, those are tourists going on their cenote tour and swimming through the cenotes. I have actually been to this region in Mexico, and I've been on these tours. I've been swimming in the cenotes, and they do have a lot of precautions and regulations on rules before you go swimming. You actually have to shower. You have to make sure you leave all your food and beverages out. They do not like litter or trash anywhere. So there are some things about keeping the areas clean, keeping everything not contaminated, because the Mayan people still do get their water from these formations. Again, also touching on tourism, with the greater amounts of tourism and population demands comes further development. So land and new resorts are always starting to pop up, and those types of land usage bring up questions about sewage drainage, land planning, and water resources. So that's always on the minds of conservationists and environmentalists that are trying to protect this area, as well as the locals who live here and still utilize these cenotes as a water source. Again, current conservation and preservation efforts are always going on. There is some new talks between the Mexican government and some conservation groups about what laws can be put in place to protect some of the cenotes for years to come. A lot of them are very close to many of the Mayan populations, and it's always an effervescent question on what new laws are going to keep these cenote habitats alive, and how much influence or how much human touch can we allow in these areas to not keep these places pure. So my research hypothesis was focused on water resources and freshwater conservation generally. I wanted to ask the question, do people who live in arid or more climates who don't receive a lot of participation more worried or more concerned about water resource planning and water conservation than people who live in climates that receive a lot of rainfall? I chose this question, I chose this topic because this is really the broader view of this topic that's very specific. We need to manage our freshwater usage, and I wanted to see what people thought in the public about how important freshwater was as a resource. So my research methods in planning for the whole paper, I did a lot of outlines of organization. I used mostly peer-reviewed journal articles. Again, the public survey, which I will get into in a moment, and I chose to interview Rich Fetterman of Rowan University because he teaches a lot of classes and talks a lot about water conservation and freshwater usage and how we can better use our water. So I thought I'd ask him a few questions about what he thought about the future for freshwater conservation. These are some of my research questions and to my results. I asked a total of 6 questions and I got 22 respondents, all from the Mid-Atlantic states. I would have preferred to have people who lived in more arid climates such as the southwestern states, but I did not get any respondents who lived in these regions. So that kind of like stunted my results a little bit, but even so, I was able to test my hypothesis. So most people in this region stated that they believe they receive a fair to high amount of precipitation, but when asked about how important water resources was as a resource to people and if they were to participate in conservation of fresh water, most people replied that they did believe that water was an important resource, and that they would somehow contribute or support efforts in mitigation and conservation of fresh water, and further educating the public on freshwater usage and water resources. So my hypothesis was kind of disproved. It would have been better tested, again, with people who live in more arid climates, but even though people around here don't have to deal with water resource issues on a day-to-day basis, because we do receive a lot of precipitation, they still believe that water was a very important resource to all mankind, and that it is important to learn more about. So some of my conclusions. You know, again, the Yucatan caves and cenotes and their relationship with the Mayan people are a timeless and wondrous geological phenomena, and truly shows us how water and how resources themselves and how our geography shapes our lifestyles and shapes how human populations have grown and developed. Without resources and without certain aspects of what your geography can provide for you determines how you live and how well your actual population can prosper. So this was a really great example of how fresh water and the existence of water affects the growth and the sustainability of a human population. These conclusions led me to view the larger questions and the larger view of this specific topic. Fresh water should be an important thing to everyone. Eventually, we will all have to deal with water resources. If we ever come to a point where there's not enough water for all the people on Earth, we're going to come into a large problem. The time is now to learn about water conservation. It doesn't matter if you live in somewhere arid or live somewhere where there's a lot of precipitation. Water resources and water are our most valuable life-sustaining resource, and it needs to be kind of made to be that way. A lot of people today really take water for granted and don't realize how significant of a resource it really is. So that's kind of like the wide view on it, what I really got from studying this specific topic. If you're interested in further information on caves and the Mayan cenotes, I actually figured out this topic and found this topic through BBC America's Planet Earth, episode 4. It was a really great episode. It's a really great series, and I was just watching it at home one day and saw this information on the cenotes and thought that it was such a great geography topic. It connects to both humans and physical geography. So if anybody's interested on further information, there's that, and there's also a few other documentaries on YouTube about the Mayan ruins and the Mayans' relationship with the cenotes, and how they used it as a primary source and a spiritual source as well. So there's some really great stuff out there, information on it, and I'm sure some of you in class would be interested in that, since we all like geology stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I hope I taught you something. Make sure you conserve your water, and I'm going to look forward to studying hydrology in the future. Thanks.